Apotheosis Chapter 35. Upon seeing this, Su Lingyun fastened one of the rings to the handle of the throwing knife, and fastened the other ring to her thumb. Then she threw the throwing knife down the mountain with all her strength. Ah! Luo Zheng exclaimed. It was dark everywhere, and the flying knife was extremely sharp. It would be difficult to find it if it was thrown deep into the ground. However, Su Lingyun flicked her hand lightly, and the flying dagger that had already been shot out returned to her. Coincidentally, she caught it in her hand. Seeing this scene, Luo Zheng couldn't help but click his tongue in amazement. These two small rings looked inconspicuous, but there seemed to be an invisible thread connecting them. The throwing knife only needed to be pulled gently and it could be returned to its original position. The throwing knife was so sharp, but Su Lingyun easily caught it in her hand. Luo Zheng couldn't help but praise her. After Luo Zheng received the throwing knife and the pair of rings, he cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks for Mentor Su's generous gift." Mentor Su pursed her lips and smiled. She suddenly patted his head and said, "From now on, you are my Xiao Yufeng's person. No need to be so polite. Quickly go back and rest. Tomorrow, after the distribution of the mountain peaks, you still have to choose a cultivation method." After Luo Zheng nodded, he went back along the way he came. On the way down the mountain, he fastened a small ring to his thumb and learned from Mentor Su to throw the throwing knife. However, when he pulled it back, the throwing knife actually shot toward him. Suddenly, Luo Zheng was scared and broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly lay down to avoid the throwing knife. Although his body was strong, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to block the throwing knife. Just now, he saw Mentor Su catch the throwing knife with her bare hands so easily, but he couldn't find the trick. After experimenting several times, he slightly grasped the trick. When he returned to the dormitory, it was already the middle of the night. Many of the trial disciples were already asleep. Luo Zheng quietly went in and closed his eyes to sleep. Early the next morning, the various mentors and trial disciples gathered together to discuss the distribution of the mountain peaks. According to yesterday's statistics, the disciples participating in the trial of blood and fire had already been ranked. Luo Zheng, who was able to kill a level 5 phantom beast, was unquestionably ranked first. He became the target of the various mentors. The various mentors began to quarrel over Luo Zheng. However, these mentors were already used to this. The drama of fighting for first place was staged almost once a month. In the end, they still couldn't give in to each other. In the end, they could only ask for Luo Zheng's opinion and let Luo Zheng choose his own place. After the surrounding disciples heard this, they were all envious. This Luo Zheng was really amazing. He could go to any mountain peak he wanted. Most of the outer disciples were thinking that if it were them, they would definitely choose the first-ranked Tianyi Peak. That was the peak that ranked first among the 33 peaks. The various mentors were waiting for Luo Zheng's choice. Among them, Elder Su was the most confident. His Tianyi Peak had a great reputation and was the strongest peak among the 33 peaks. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they would choose his Tianyi Peak. "I choose Xiao Yufeng," Luo Zheng said calmly. As soon as these words came out, the various mentors were suddenly stunned. Among the 33 peaks, Luo Zheng had the possibility of choosing the top 10 peaks. For example, the second-ranked Black Rock Peak, or the fifth-ranked Huanling Peak. However, Luo Zheng actually chose the last-ranked Xiao Yufeng. What kind of situation was this? Su Lingyun leisurely walked out and said to Luo Zheng with a smile, "I accept your choice. Now, Luo Zheng can be considered as our Xiao Yufeng's outer disciple." The complexions of Mentor Su and the other mentors weren't good. At the same time, they also had some doubts. This Su Lingyun must have paid some price to bring Luo Zheng into the sect. Otherwise, Luo Zheng wouldn't have chosen Xiao Yufeng. "Mentor Su, this isn't too good, right?" Mentor Su was determined to get Luo Zheng. It had always been the tradition of the 33 peaks to select the best. Although everyone understood that the current performance might not be outstanding in the future, after all, the Blue Cloud sect had produced countless talented and proud disciples in the long river of time. However, there weren't many who had great achievements in the end. However, the more outstanding disciples there were on their own peak, the higher the probability of them achieving great achievements. This was a simple and easy to understand principle. "Oh. Mentor Su. Tell me, what's not good about it?" One is willing to fight and the other is willing to suffer. I think Mentor Su understands this, right? Mentor Su sneered and said, if Mentor Su wants to create more problems, I can accompany you to the end. I just don't know if you have the grace to do so. Hearing Su Lingyun's words and Luo Zheng's calm answer, the two must have reached some kind of agreement and tacit understanding. Other than cursing Her Highness Su Lingyun in their hearts, what else could they say? In the situation where Su Lingyun was unreasonable, they could still fight with her. However, if they still looked for trouble with Su Lingyun and annoyed her, they would simply be looking for trouble. Therefore, the fight for first place this year came to an end. Next, they began to quarrel over the second-ranked outer disciple. After Luo Zheng chose Xiao Yufeng, Mo Can also chose Xiao Yufeng without hesitation. After spending half a day, all the trial disciples and landowning households had their own places to go. However, this wasn't the end. There was still a very important step, which was to choose a cultivation method suitable for oneself. In the Blue Cloud sect, there was a large hall called the Heavenly Book Pavilion. In the Heavenly Book Pavilion, almost all the cultivation methods in the entire empire were collected. However, if the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect wanted to enter the Heavenly Book Pavilion and choose a cultivation method, it wasn't an easy task. Every time they chose a cultivation method, they had to spend 100 points. According to the market price, it was 200 square crystals. For landowning households, this might be a simple matter. However, for the vast majority of disciples who were born in the grassroots, this was definitely a huge sum of money. The most black-hearted thing was that because there were too many cultivation methods in the Heavenly Book Pavilion, they were too complicated. There were also high-level cultivation methods and even more low-level cultivation methods. Some disciples who painstakingly accumulated 100 points only to exchange for an ordinary, reckless ox fist book. This kind of cultivation method could only be sold for a few dozen taels of gold in the imperial capital. It was a genuine commodity. It was a huge loss. Thus, the selection of cultivation methods in the Heavenly Book Pavilion was very particular. All the outer sect disciples had one free opportunity to enter the Heavenly Book Pavilion to choose a cultivation method. Under the guidance of the mentors, everyone moved towards the Heavenly Book Pavilion. The deeper they went into the depths of the Blue Cloud sect, the more they could feel the vastness of the Blue Cloud sect. Everyone passed through a mountain forest, a lake, and a variety of magnificent buildings before finally stopping in front of a large hall. This large hall was completely purple. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see rays of purple light being emitted from it. Luo Zheng stared at the countless rays of purple light, his eyes slightly uncomfortable. This feeling was very strange. It was similar to the pressure emitted by Qinglong's sculpture in his mind, but its power was naturally much weaker. Everyone, don't keep staring at those rays of light. These rays of light can pass through your eyes and harm your soul, one of the mentors warned. Hearing that these rays of light could harm one's soul, all the outer sect disciples were shocked and quickly averted their gazes. The soul was the most important thing to a person. Damage to the soul was called damage to the spirit. If it was light, one would feel dizzy and weak for a few days. If it was heavy, one would not be able to move for a few years or even become an idiot. Mentor, what are these rays of light? An outer sect disciple asked. This is will, the mentor explained. Everything in this world has the existence of will. Humans have will, heaven has will, swords have sword intent, and sabers also have saber intent. The mentor pointed at the purple rays of light and said, that purple ray of light was once a Xingtian beast. After it was killed by our Blue Cloud sect, it was buried here. That is its Xingtian will. Hearing this, Luo Zheng's mind suddenly moved. If that was the case, then the pressure of the Azure Dragon in his mind was the dragon will. Thinking of the feeling of his soul being continuously torn apart by dragon intent, Luo Zheng would never forget that kind of pain. But what was this will? How could he figure it out? Luo Zheng did not rashly ask this question. After everyone walked onto the platform in front of the Heavenly Book Pavilion, the mentors stopped. This is your only chance to choose a secret cultivation method for free. You can go. I will kindly remind you that the deeper you go into the Heavenly Book Pavilion, the higher the level of the cultivation method. However, the deeper you go, the more powerful the heaven-punishing intent becomes. Even if you close your eyes, the heaven-punishing intent will still injure your soul. So, go as far as you can. Don't try to be brave, warned one of the instructors. Hearing this, the outer sect disciples spread out and walked towards the heavenly book pavilion. Luo Zheng walked up the stairs. After passing through the stairs and through the door, he entered a magnificent hall. In the center of the hall, Luo Zheng saw a large character cast from black iron. It was the character Wang. This is the outermost area of the heavenly book pavilion. All the cultivation methods here are yellow class. They are all trash cultivation methods, worthless. Several landowning households' disciples shouted. Then they walked past the Huang character and walked inside. Those yellow class cultivation methods were densely packed on the bookshelves. Luo Zheng casually estimated that just one bookshelf could hold 10,000 yellow class cultivation methods. There were a total of 20 bookshelves here, so wouldn't there be 200,000 yellow class cultivation methods? Yellow class cultivation methods were widely spread in the empire. Although the words of those landowning households' disciples were unpleasant to hear, they were indeed worthless. Only a small number of people stayed here. Most of the people walked inside. Luo Zheng did not think too much and followed the group. However, he noticed that Mo Kan did not follow them. Instead, he stayed in the hall with the yellow class cultivation methods. After walking a few feet forward, everyone entered another large hall. In the middle of this large hall, there was the word Xian. Needless to say, this was the hall with the yellow class cultivation methods. In this hall, the purple Xingtian will gradually increased. Some people felt uncomfortable and retreated. Resisting the pressure of the Xingtian will relied on the strength of the soul. Most of the people present had not tempered their souls. Some people were born with strong souls, while others were born with weak souls. This had nothing to do with strength. It was almost an innate difference. Although a few outer sect disciples felt very uncomfortable, they did not want to give up. Thus, they closed their eyes and resisted the pressure of the Xingtian will. After a while, their faces turned green and black, as if they were about to faint. In the end, they had no choice but to retreat. There was even one person who fainted in the hall and was carried back. Most of the remaining people understood that the hall with the yellow class cultivation methods was their limit. If they went any further, they might hurt their souls. Thus, most people stayed here to search for their own cultivation methods. Only a few people continued to walk forward. Only a few people continued to walk forward. Only a few